Captain Jake Martinez stood at the wide window of his ship, looking out at the stars. The exploration vessel Harmony moved quietly through space toward another world that might hold alien life. Jake had been doing this job for 10 years now, visiting new planets and meeting new species. But something was wrong with the galaxy, something that made him feel cold inside. "Captain, we're getting close to the Zentari home world," said Commander Pete Williams from behind him. Pete was Jake's best friend and the ship's tactical officer. He was good at his job and always kept the crew safe. Jake turned around and walked to his chair in the center of the bridge. "Good. Maybe this time will be different." Dr. Lisa Chun looked up from her science station. She was the ship's expert on alien life forms, and she had been studying the strange pattern they kept finding. "I hope so too, Captain." "But the readings are the same as always." Jake sat down and thought about all the worlds they had visited in the past year. Every alien species they met was the same in one terrible way. They had no music. They had no art. They didn't laugh or cry or sing. They just existed, doing their work and talking in flat, emotionless voices. The Zentari were the first species they had found like this. Jake remembered when they first made contact 6 months ago. The aliens were tall and thin with blue skin, and they were very smart. They could solve any math problem in seconds. They had built amazing cities and powerful computers. But when Jake's crew tried to share human music with them, the Zentari just stared with empty eyes. "Why do you make these organized sound waves?" the Zentari leader had asked. "They serve no practical purpose." Jake had tried to explain that music made people happy, that it told stories and shared feelings. But the Zentari couldn't understand. They spoke only in numbers and facts. When Jake played a simple song on his guitar, they analyzed the sound frequencies but felt nothing. "Captain, we're being contacted by the Zentari," said Lieutenant Amy Rogers from the communication station. "Put them on screen," Jake said. Large screen at the front of the bridge showed a Zentari standing in a gray metal room. Like all of his species, he wore simple gray clothes and had no expression on his face. "Human vessel Harmony," the alien said in a flat voice. "We have prepared the requested data about our history. You may collect it when you arrive." "Thank you," Jake replied. "We look forward to learning more about your people." The Zentari stared at him for a moment. "We do not understand the phrase 'look forward.' It suggests emotional anticipation of future events. This is inefficient." The screen went black. Jake sighed and rubbed his forehead. Lisa came over and sat in the chair next to him. "It's the same everywhere," she said quietly. "The Krell, the Vorthen, the Makari. All of them have lost something important." Pete joined them, crossing his arms. "Lost what? Exactly? They're all doing fine. They have technology. They have societies. Maybe they just never developed music like we did." Lisa shook her head. "No. Pete, I've been studying the archaeological data from their worlds. They all had music once. They all had art and poetry and dance. Look at this." She pulled out a small tablet and showed them images of ancient ruins. There were carvings on stone walls that showed aliens dancing and playing instruments. There were the remains of great theaters and concert halls. There were even primitive sound recording devices that still held fragments of beautiful melodies. "This is from the Krell home world," Lisa explained. "These ruins are over 3,000 years old. The Krell were once a musical people. They created symphonies that could make listeners cry with joy. But something happened. About 2,000 years ago, all the music stopped." Jake studied the images. He saw carvings of Krell aliens with their forearms raised in dance. Their faces full of expression. The modern Krell they had met were nothing like this. They only communicated through chemical smells, and they never showed any emotion. "The same pattern exists on every world we visited," Lisa continued. "Great musical civilizations that suddenly went silent. All of them lost their creativity around the same time period, give or take a few hundred years. But why?" Pete asked. "What could make entire species forget how to make music?" I don't know, Lisa said. But I'm starting to think something took it from them. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He thought about Earth, about the concerts and festivals and street musicians that filled human cities with beautiful sounds. He thought about his daughter's school choir and his wife's favorite jazz records. What if something tried to take music away from humanity? The ship's computer made a soft sound. Approaching Xanthari orbit in 10 minutes, announced the ship's artificial intelligence in a calm female voice. Jake stood up. All right, let's go down and collect their historical data. Maybe we'll find some answers. 2 hours later, Jake, Lisa, and Pete were walking through the main city of the Xanthari home world. The buildings were tall and efficient, made of gray, metal, and glass. Everything was perfectly organized and clean. But there were no decorations, no colors, no signs of individual creativity. The Xanthari who guided them spoke in the same flat tone as all the others. Our ancestors built inefficient structures, he said, pointing to some old ruins near the city center. They wasted resources on non-functional designs. Jake looked at the ruins and saw what had once been a beautiful temple with curved walls and artistic sculptures. Now it was just broken stone that the Xanthari ignored. Why did they build it that way? Lisa asked. Unknown, the Xanthari replied. The records from that time period are incomplete. Our ancestors appear to suffer from a form of mass mental disorder that made them behave irrationally. What kind of disorder? Pete asked. Dr. Xanthari paused, as if trying to remember words he rarely used. They engaged in activities that served no survival purpose. They made organized sound patterns. They created visual displays without informational content. They moved their bodies in synchronized patterns without practical goals. Jake realized the alien was describing music, art, and dance, but he couldn't even understand what these things were anymore. They spent the rest of the day collecting data and interviewing Xanthari historians. The information was always the same. 2,000 years ago, the Xanthari had been a very different people. Then something happened, something the modern Xanthari called the Great Awakening. When their species had learned to focus only on logical, practical matters. As they returned to their ship that evening, Jake felt more worried than ever. Whatever had taken the music from the Xanthari had also taken it from every other alien species they had found. And now he wondered if Earth might be next. Lisa, he said as they walked up the ship's ramp, how long would it take to send a message back? To Earth? About 6 months with our current communication systems, she replied. Why? Jake looked back at the gray, silent city behind them. Because I think we need to warn them about something. Something that's been hunting music across the galaxy. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, something ancient and hungry began to turn its attention toward the distant blue world where humans still sang their songs. 3 weeks after leaving the Xanthari homeworld, the Harmony received an emergency signal from the edge of known space. The message was strange because it came as music instead of words. Jake had never heard anything like it before. The melody was beautiful and sad at the same time, like someone crying and laughing together. Captain, this is incredible, said Lisa as she worked at her science station. The signal is coming from a planet called Crescendo. According to our star maps, no one has been there before. Jake stood behind her, listening to the musical message play again. Can you understand what it means? I think it's a distress call, Lisa said, but it's unlike any communication we've ever received. It's pure music, but somehow I can feel what they're trying to say. Pete walked over from his station, frowning. Music is language? That doesn't make sense. Maybe it does, Jake said slowly. If these beings communicate through music, they might be the first musical species we've found since we started this mission. The melody played again, and this time Jake felt something in his chest. The music seemed to be saying, help us, and hurry. And we're running out of time, all at once, without using any words. Set course for Crescendo, Jake ordered. Maximum speed. The journey took 4 days. As they got closer to the planet, they began receiving more musical messages. Each one was more desperate than the last. The melodies were getting weaker too, like whoever was sending them was getting tired. Crescendo was a beautiful world covered in purple forests and silver oceans. As the Harmony entered orbit, Jake could see cities that looked like giant musical instruments. There were buildings shaped like harps and flutes, with bridges that curved like violin bows. "Captain, we're being contacted," said Amy from communications. The main screen showed an alien unlike any they had seen before. She was tall and thin like the Zentari, but her skin was silver and seemed to shimmer with different colors. Her eyes were large and kind, but they looked very tired and sad. "Welcome, humans from Earth," she said in a voice that sounded like singing even when she spoke normally. "I am Core Keeper Valter, leader of the Lyrians. We have been hoping someone like you would come. We received your musical distress calls," Jake said. "How can we help you?" Valter's expression became even sadder. "You must come to our world quickly. Time is very short for us." The silence grows stronger each day. Within an hour, Jake, Lisa, and Pete were standing in the most beautiful city they had ever seen. The Lyrian buildings were made of materials that hummed softly in the wind. The streets were laid out like musical scales, and everywhere they looked, there were instruments and sculptures that created gentle sounds. But something was wrong. The city was too quiet. Many of the Lyrians they saw moved slowly, as if they were very sick. Their silver skin looked dull, and their eyes seemed empty. Valter led them to a great hall that looked like the inside of a massive violin. "Please sit," she said, pointing to chairs that were carved from some kind of singing wood. "I must tell you about the silence before it is too late." "What is the silence?" Lisa asked. "It is an ancient evil that feeds on music and creativity," Valter explained. "For thousands of years, it has been moving across the galaxy, consuming the musical essence of entire species. When it comes to a world, the people slowly lose their ability to create, to feel, to express themselves through art." Pete leaned forward. "Is that what happened to the Zentari and the other species we've met?" "Yes," Valter said sadly. "They were all musical peoples once. The Zentari created mathematical symphonies that could solve complex problems through sound. The Krell made chemical music that could heal the sick. The Vorthen built logical compositions that helped them understand the universe." Jake felt his heart beating faster. "And the silence took all of that away?" "The silence feeds on emotional resonance and creative expression," Valter continued. "Music is the purest form of both, so it hungers for musical species most of all. When it consumes a people's musical essence, they become hollow inside. They can still think and work, but they cannot feel or create anymore." Lisa pulled out her tablet and started taking notes. "How does it work? How does this silence actually take away someone's creativity?" Before Valter could answer, a young Lyrian entered the hall. She was small and moved like a dancer, but her silver skin was very pale. She carried a strange instrument that looked like a combination of a violin and a harp. "This is Aria Vental," Valter said. "She is our youngest and most talented musician. Aria, would you please show our human guests what is happening to us?" Aria nodded and raised her instrument. When she began to play, Jake felt tears come to his eyes. The music was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. It told the story of a happy people who loved to sing and dance, who created music that could make flowers bloom and heal broken hearts. But as Aria played, something terrible happened. Her skin became paler and paler. Her eyes started to lose their brightness. The music itself seemed to be draining away her life force. "Stop," Jake called out, but Aria continued playing. The melody changed, becoming sadder and more desperate. Now it told the story of the silence coming to their world like a dark cloud. It showed how the Lyrians were slowly losing their ability to make music, how each song they played made them weaker. When Arya finally stopped playing, she was so weak. She almost fell down. Walter caught her and helped her sit in a chair. "Do you see?" Walter asked Jake and his crew. "Every time we make music now, the silence feeds on us. But we cannot stop making music because it is who we are. If we become silent, we will become like the other species you have met, alive but not truly living." Lisa looked at her readings. On her tablet, the energy patterns are incredible. When Arya played, I detected some kind of quantum resonance that was being absorbed by something, like an invisible force was stealing the music itself. "How long do you have?" Pete asked quietly. Walter looked out the window at her dying city. "Perhaps a few days, maybe a week. The silence is very close now. We can feel it pressing against our world like a cold wind." Jake stood up and walked to the window. In the distance, he could see what looked like a wall of darkness moving slowly toward the city. It wasn't a natural storm or clouds. It was something else, something that seemed to eat light and sound as it moved. "The silence," Walter said, following his gaze. "It will be here soon." "There has to be something we can do," Jake said. "Some way to fight this thing." Walter shook her head. "Many species have tried to fight the silence. All have failed. It is too powerful, too hungry. It has been consuming music for millions of years." Lisa looked up from her tablet. "Wait a minute. Walter, have you ever encountered humans before?" "No," the Lyrian leader replied. "You are the first humans we have met. Why do you ask?" "Because humans are the only species we've found that still has their music," Lisa said excitedly. "Every other species we've met has already been consumed by the silence. But humans on Earth are still creating music, still feeling emotions, still making art." Jake felt a spark of hope. "You think there's something special about human music?" "I think there has to be," Lisa said. "We're the only ones who haven't been affected. Maybe human music is different somehow. Maybe it's stronger." Arya looked up from her chair, her pale eyes showing a tiny bit of hope. "Could human music really help us?" "I don't know," Jake said honestly, "but we're going to try." He turned to Pete. "Contact the ship. Tell them to prepare all our musical recordings and instruments. We're going to see if human music can do something that Lyrian music cannot. What if it doesn't work?" Pete asked. Jake looked back at the approaching darkness on the horizon. "Then at least we'll go down fighting. And maybe we'll learn something that can help us protect Earth." As night fell on crescendo, the crew of the Harmony prepared for their first battle against an enemy they didn't understand. But they had something the silence had never faced before: human music, and the stubborn human refusal to give up without a fight. The last song of the Lyrians was about to meet the first song of humanity's resistance. Jake stood in the Harmony's cargo bay, looking at all the musical instruments his crew had brought from Earth. There were guitars, violins, drums, flutes, and even a small electronic keyboard. They had seemed like simple entertainment when they left Earth. Now they might be humanity's only weapon against the silence. "Captain, we've set up the testing area," said Lieutenant Amy Rogers. She had helped arrange speakers and recording equipment around the bay. "Dr. Chun wants to measure everything when we play." Lisa was busy with her scientific instruments, checking readings and making notes. "We need to understand exactly what happens when humans make music," she said. "If there's something special about it, we have to figure out what that is." Pete walked into the bay carrying his old harmonica. He had played it since he was a boy, but he looked nervous now. "I still don't understand how music can be a weapon," he said. "Maybe it's not about the music being a weapon," Jake replied. "Maybe it's about music making us stronger somehow." Outside the ship, the silence continued to move toward the Lyrian city. They could see it through the windows, a wall of darkness that seemed to swallow everything in its path. The Lyrians had told him it would reach the city in less than 2 days. "All right, everyone," Jake said to his crew. "Let's start simple. Pete, play something on your harmonica." Pete raised a small instrument to his lips and began to play a slow, sad melody. It was a song his grandfather had taught him about workers going home after a long day. The notes filled the cargo bay with a warm human sound. Lisa watched her instruments carefully. "Interesting," she said. "I'm detecting quantum resonance patterns, but they're different from what we saw with deliriums." "Different how?" Jake asked. Delirium music seemed to weaken reality somehow, making it easier for the silence to feed. But Pete's harmonica is doing the opposite. It's making the quantum fabric stronger. Amy picked up a guitar and started playing along with Pete's harmonica. She chose a simple chord progression that matched his melody. The two instruments together created something beautiful and peaceful. "The effect is getting stronger," Lisa said excitedly. "When you play together, the quantum resonance doubles, not just adds. It's like human music works better when people combine their efforts." Jake felt something stirring in his chest. The music his crew was making reminded him of home, of sitting around campfires with friends, of his daughter's school concerts. Human music wasn't just sound. It was memory and feeling and hope all mixed together. "Let me try something," Jake said. He picked up his acoustic guitar and began playing a more complex piece. It was a song he had written himself about exploring the stars and finding new worlds. As his fingers moved across the strings, he felt the music connecting him to every human who had ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. Lisa's instrument started beeping rapidly. "Captain, this is incredible. Your personal composition is creating resonance patterns I've never seen before. It's like the music is rewriting the laws of physics in a small area around us." "What do you mean?" Pete asked, still playing his harmonica. "I mean, human music doesn't just make sound waves," Lisa explained. "It creates what I can only call reality waves. When humans make music with genuine emotion and creativity, you're actually strengthening the fabric of space and time itself." Jake stopped playing and stared at her. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Lisa asked. "Think about what music does to humans. It makes you feel emotions, remember experiences, imagine new possibilities. It connects people across time and space. What if that's not just psychological? What if music literally connects things at a quantum level?" Amy put down her guitar and walked over to Lisa's equipment. "So when the silence feeds on other species, it's actually eating holes in reality." "Exactly," Lisa said. "And those holes make it easier for the silence to consume more creativity, more music, more life. It's like a cosmic infection that spreads by destroying the thing that could heal it." Jake felt a chill as he understood what Lisa was saying. But human music works differently. Instead of weakening reality, it makes it stronger. "That's my theory," Lisa nodded. "But we need to test it. We need to see if human music can actually push back against the silence." They spent the next several hours experimenting with different types of music. Jake played classical pieces he had learned as a child. Amy played rock songs that made everyone want to dance. Pete played folk tunes that told stories of human courage and determination. Each type of music created different patterns on Lisa's instruments, but they all had one thing in common. They made the space around them more stable, more real, more alive. "I think I understand now," Lisa said as she reviewed her data. "Other species create music, but humans create music about being human. Your songs are about love, loss, hope, struggle, victory, defeat. All the things that make you who you are." "So, what?" Pete asked. "Delirians make music about their experiences too." "No," Lisa shook her head. "Delirians make music about music. They create beautiful sounds, but their songs don't carry the same weight of lived experience that human music does. Human music is autobiography set to melody. Every song tells the story of what it means to be human." Jake picked up his guitar again and played a few chords. "You're saying our music is stronger because we put our whole selves into it? I'm saying your music is stronger because it comes from a species that has never stopped fighting. Lisa replied. Humans have faced disasters, wars, diseases, extinctions, and you've always found a way to survive and grow. That determination, that refusal to give up, it's in every song you create. Amy started playing again, this time choosing a song about overcoming difficult times. So our music is like concentrated human stubbornness? Lisa laughed. In a way, yes. And stubbornness might be exactly what we need to fight something that has been consuming creativity for millions of years. Suddenly, the ship's communication system activated. Valter's face appeared on the screen, but she looked much weaker than before. Human friends, she said in a voice that was barely above a whisper. The silence is moving faster than we expected. It will reach our city tonight. Jake could see panic in the Lyrian leader's eyes. Valter, we think we might have found something. Human music seems to work differently than other species' music. Please, Valter said desperately. If you have any ideas, try them now. We are almost out of time. Jake looked at his crew. Pete was gripping his harmonica tightly. Amy had her hands on her guitar. Lisa was still working with her instruments, trying to understand the quantum effects of human music. All right, Jake said. We're going to try something that's either going to save your people or get us all consumed by the silence. He turned to his crew. Everyone get your instruments. We're going down to the planet, and we're going to play the most human music we can create. If human music really does make reality stronger, then maybe we can build a wall of sound that the silence can't break through. And if we're wrong? Pete asked Jake shouldered his guitar and headed for the shuttle bay. Then at least the last music in the galaxy will be a human song. As they prepared to leave the ship, Jake couldn't help but think about Earth, where millions of humans were making music without knowing they were humanity's greatest weapon. Children learning piano, teenagers playing in garage bands, elderly people humming old songs. All of them were unknowingly preparing for a battle that would determine the fate of creativity itself. The crew of the Harmony was about to find out if the power of human music was real, or if they were just the next meal for an ancient cosmic hunger that had never tasted defeat. The shuttle landed in the center of the Lyrian city just as the sun was setting. Jake, Lisa, Pete, and Amy stepped out carrying their instruments and equipment. The city around them was eerily quiet. Most of the Lyrians had gone inside there. Holmes, too weak to move around much anymore. Valter met them at the landing pad, but she could barely stand. 2 other Lyrians had to help her walk. Her silver skin was now almost gray, and her eyes looked hollow. Thank you for coming, she whispered. The silence will be here within the hour. Jake looked toward the horizon and saw what she meant. The wall of darkness was much closer now, maybe only a few miles away. As he watched, he could see it swallowing trees, buildings, even the light from the setting sun. Everything it touched simply disappeared into nothingness. What exactly happens when it reaches the city? Lisa asked, setting up her scientific instruments. First, the music stops, Valter explained weakly. Not just our instruments, but all sound. The wind stops making noise. Water stops bubbling. Even footsteps become silent. Amy shivered as she tuned her guitar. That sounds horrible. Then the creativity dies, Valter continued. People forget how to make art, how to sing, how to feel joy or sadness through expression. After that, the emotions themselves begin to fade. In the end, we become like the Zentari, alive, but not really living. Jake picked up his guitar and strummed a few chords. The sound seemed small against the approaching darkness, but Lisa's instruments showed the familiar quantum patterns they had discovered on the ship. All right, Jake said to his crew. Remember what we learned. Human music makes reality stronger. We're going to build a barrier of sound and hope it can hold back the silence. Pete raised his harmonica. What should we play? Jake thought for a moment. Let's start with something that represents who we are as humans. Something that shows we won't give up. They began with an old folk song from Earth, a simple melody about people working together to build something better. Jake played the basic chords on his guitar while Pete provided harmony with his harmonica. Amy added a counter melody, and Lisa, who wasn't much of a musician, clapped along to keep the rhythm. The effect was immediate. Lisa's instrument showed the quantum resonance patterns growing stronger. Around them, the air itself seemed to become more solid, more real. "It's working," Lisa said excitedly. "The reality field is strengthening." But as they played, the silence grew closer. Jake could see it more clearly now. It wasn't just darkness, it was the absence of everything. Where it passed, colors faded, sounds died, and even the air seemed to become thin and lifeless. "Keep playing," Jake called to his crew. "Don't stop, no matter what happens." They switched to a more energetic song, something with a driving beat that spoke of human determination. The music seemed to push back against the approaching silence, creating a bubble of normal reality around the city center. Then the silence reached the edge of the city. The first thing Jake noticed was that his guitar strings began to sound flat, even though he hadn't changed the tuning. The music became harder to play, as if something was fighting against every note. "Captain," Lisa called out, her voice strained, "the quantum resonance is being interfered with. Something is trying to cancel out our music." The silence continued to advance, and now Jake could see what it really was. It wasn't a wall of darkness. It was a living thing, a massive entity made of consumed creativity and stolen songs. Within its shifting form, he could see fragments of all the music it had devoured over the millions of years. Bits of Zentari, mathematical symphonies, pieces of Krell chemical melodies, remnants of Vorthen logical compositions, all trapped and twisted into something horrible. And then the silence spoke. Its voice was the opposite of music, not just silence, but the active destruction of sound itself. When it spoke, Jake felt the words trying to erase his ability to hear. "Why do you resist?" the silence asked. "I bring peace. I bring order. I free species from the chaos of emotion and the waste of creativity." Jake forced himself to keep playing, even though his fingers were getting numb. "We don't want your kind of peace," he called back. "You do not understand," the silence replied, moving closer. "I have watched civilizations rise and fall. I have seen species destroy themselves with wars fought over artistic differences, with conflicts born from emotional passion. Without creativity, without music, they find peace." "That's not peace," Amy shouted, still playing her guitar despite the growing difficulty. "That's just emptiness." The silence paused, and for a moment Jake thought he saw something like confusion in its shifting form. "Emptiness is better than pain. I have consumed the suffering of 1,000,000 worlds. The sadness in their songs, the anger in their compositions, the desperation in their final melodies. I spare them from this suffering." Lisa looked up from her instruments. "Jake, I think. I understand something. The silence isn't evil. It's trying to help in its own twisted way." "What do you mean?" Pete asked, his harmonica playing becoming more labored. "It thinks creativity causes pain," Lisa explained, "and it's not entirely wrong. Music can make people sad. Art can show us uncomfortable truths. Creativity often comes from struggle and difficulty." Jake felt his guitar strings getting looser, harder to play. The silence was now only a few hundred yards away. "So, what's your point?" "My point is that the silence doesn't understand the whole picture," Lisa said. "Yes, creativity can cause pain, but it also creates joy, hope, love, connection. It doesn't just come from suffering. It helps us deal with suffering." Jake looked at the approaching entity and suddenly understood what Lisa meant. The silence had been consuming creativity for so long that it only saw the painful parts. It had never experienced the healing power of music, the way a song could lift someone up or bring people together. "Silence," Jake called out, still playing his guitar despite the growing difficulty. "You say you've heard the sadness in their songs, but have you ever heard the joy?" The entity stopped moving. Joy? Music isn't just about pain, Jake continued. It's about celebration, about love, about hope for the future. You've been taking away the thing that helps people heal from their suffering. The silence seemed to consider this. But the pain. The emotions cause such pain. Amy stepped forward, still playing her guitar. Yes, sometimes music hurts. Sometimes we cry when we hear a sad song. But we also laugh, we dance, we fall in love. You can't have the good without accepting the bad. Show me, the silence said suddenly. If what you say is true, show me this joy you speak of. Jake looked at his crew. This was their chance. He started playing a new song, something bright and uplifting. It was a children's song from Earth, simple and happy, about playing in the sunshine and making friends. Pete joined in with his harmonica, adding a playful melody. Amy found chords that made the song bounce and dance. Even Lisa began to sing along, her voice carrying the innocent joy of the lyrics. As they played, something amazing happened. The quantum resonance patterns that Lisa had been measuring began to change. Instead of just strengthening reality, the music began to create something new, patterns of pure joy and happiness that seemed to glow with their own light. The silence recoiled as these patterns reached it. For the first time in millions of years, it was experiencing creativity that wasn't born from pain or struggle, but from simple human happiness. I do not understand, the silence said, its voice now uncertain. This music does not come from suffering. No, Jake said, still playing. This music comes from hope, from the belief that tomorrow can be better than today, from the joy of being alive and sharing that life with others. The silence began to change. The darkness started to shift and swirl, and Jake could see flashes of color within it, all the creativity it had consumed over the eons, but now touched by something it had never experienced before. What is happening to me? The silence asked. And for the first time, its voice sounded almost musical. Jake smiled as he played. You're remembering what you used to be before you became afraid of creativity. You're remembering that music isn't the enemy, it's the cure. The transformation of the silence had begun, but Jake knew the real battle was just starting. They had shown it a glimpse of what music could be, but changing something that had existed for millions of years would take more than one song. They would need the combined music of all humanity to complete what they had started. The journey back to Earth took 6 weeks, but Jake used every day to plan what might be humanity's most important mission. The silence had retreated after their encounter on Crescendo, confused and changing, but it was still out there. And now, it knew about Earth, the world where humans made music every single day. Captain, we're receiving a priority message from Earth Defense Command, said Amy as the Harmony approached the solar system. Jake straightened in his chair. Put it on screen. General Roy Tucker appeared on the main display. He was a serious man with gray hair and tired eyes. Captain Martinez, we've been tracking some unusual energy readings at the edge of our system. Our scientists think something big is coming our way. It's called the silence, General, Jake said. And we need to evacuate Earth immediately. General Tucker frowned. Evacuate the entire planet. Captain, there are 8 billion people on Earth. Even if we had enough ships, which we don't, where would we take them? Lisa stepped into view of the camera. General, evacuation won't work anyway. The silence doesn't just consume individual planets. It's consumed entire star systems. Running away isn't the answer. Then what is? General, Tucker asked. Jake took a deep breath. Music, sir. Human music. We need every person on Earth to participate in the largest musical performance in human history. There was a long pause. General Tucker looked like he thought Jake had lost his mind. Captain, are you seriously suggesting we fight an alien threat? With a concert? Not just a concert, Lisa explained. Based on our research, human music creates quantum resonance patterns that can strengthen reality itself. If we can get enough people making music at the same time, we might be able to create a defensive field around Earth. And if you're wrong, General Tucker asked. Jake met his eyes through the screen. Then at least humanity's last act will be a song. 2 hours later, Jake stood in the Global Music Conservatory in New York City. It was the most advanced musical research center on Earth, with recording studios, concert halls, and laboratories where scientists studied the effects of music on the human brain. Director Amy Richardson met them at the entrance. She was a small woman with bright eyes and silver hair, and she had dedicated her life to understanding music. With her were Carlos Mendez, one of Earth's greatest violin players, and Nina Foster, a composer who wrote music for movies and symphonies. Captain Martinez, Amy Richardson said, I've read your reports. What you're describing sounds impossible, but the quantum physics data is fascinating. Carlos held his violin case tightly. If music really can be used as a defense, then we need to understand how it works. Nina looked worried. The problem is scale. Even if we could get every musician on Earth to play at the same time, how do we coordinate something that big? And what kind of music would work best? Jake looked around the room at all the musical instruments and recording equipment. That's what we need to figure out. Dr. Chun showed him what we learned. Lisa set up her instruments and began explaining her discoveries about quantum resonance and reality strengthening. As she talked, Carlos picked up his violin and began playing a simple melody. Nina sat at a piano and added harmony. Amy Richardson listened to everything carefully, taking notes. Remarkable, Amy Richardson said when Lisa finished. So human. Music doesn't just create sound, it creates stability in the fabric of space and time itself. That's our theory, Lisa nodded. But we need to test it on a much larger scale. Carlos put down his violin. I have contacts in orchestras around the world. We could organize simultaneous performances in major cities. That's not enough, Nina said, shaking her head. If this silent entity is as powerful as you say, we need more than just professional musicians. We need everyone. Amy Richardson stood up and walked to a window that looked out over the city. Every person on Earth who can make music, she said slowly. Children humming, teenagers with guitars, elderly people singing in their gardens. Everyone. How do we coordinate that? Jake asked. Nina smiled for the first time since they had met. The same way we've always shared music, through technology. We broadcast a basic musical structure, something simple that anyone can participate in. Then we let people add their own parts. Over the next 3 days, they worked frantically to create what Nina called the Symphony of Resistance. It wasn't like any piece of music ever written before. Instead of having fixed parts for specific instruments, it was designed to let anyone contribute. The symphony started with a simple drum beat that anyone could clap along with. Then it added a basic melody that could be hummed, whistled, or played on any instrument. As it progressed, it left space for people to add their own music, rock guitars, classical violins, electronic keyboards, even simple singing. The genius of this, Nina explained as she worked on the final arrangements, is that it captures everything that makes human music special. It's collaborative, it's emotional, and it gives everyone a voice. Carlos tested different sections with his violin. Each part tells a story. The beginning is about struggle and determination. The middle is about hope and cooperation. The end is about triumph and celebration. Amy Richardson coordinated with musicians around the world, explaining the plan and teaching them their parts. Meanwhile, Admiral Helen Clark worked with the military to set up the broadcasting equipment needed to reach every corner of Earth. Captain, Admiral Clark said during one of their planning meetings, our deep space sensors are picking up movement at the edge of the solar system. Whatever this silent entity is, it's getting closer. Jake felt his stomach tighten. How long do we have? Maybe 48 hours before it reaches Earth's orbit. Jake looked around the room at all the people working to save their world. Musicians practicing, technicians setting up equipment, scientists calculating quantum resonance patterns. Then, we better be ready. The night before the performance, Jake stood on the roof of the conservatory, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the silence was approaching. Tomorrow, every human on Earth would make music together for the first time in history. Carlos joined him on the roof, carrying his violin. "Are you nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," Jake admitted. "What if we're wrong? What if human music isn't special enough to stop something that's been consuming creativity for millions of years?" Carlos raised his violin and began to play a soft, gentle melody. It was a lullaby his grandmother had taught him when he was young. A simple song about being safe and loved. As he played, Jake felt some of his fear fade away. The music reminded him why they were fighting. Not just to save Earth, but to save. The ability to create moments like this, quiet, beautiful, human moments where music could make everything feel possible. "Tomorrow," Carlos said when he finished playing, 8 billion people are going to make music together. Even if we fail, that will be the most beautiful sound the universe has ever heard. Jake smiled. "Then let's make sure it's not the last." Down in the city below, people were preparing for the performance of their lives. Children practiced songs in their bedrooms. Street musicians tuned their guitars. Elderly people remembered lullabies from their youth. Orchestras rehearsed in concert halls, while garage bands set up in basements. All across Earth, humanity was getting ready to sing as one voice against the darkness that was coming to consume their creativity. Tomorrow would prove whether the power of human music was just a theory, or the greatest weapon their species had ever possessed. Jake stood in the main control room of the Global Music Conservatory, watching screens that showed cities all around Earth. In New York, a massive orchestra was setting up in Central Park. In London, thousands of people filled Trafalgar Square with guitars and drums. In Tokyo, children sat in school courtyards with simple instruments. Everywhere he looked, people were preparing to make music together. "Global coordination is online," reported Admiral Helen Clark from her command station. "We have broadcasting stations ready on all continents. Every major city, most small towns, and even remote villages are connected to the network." Nina Foster sat at the main piano, her hands resting on the keys. "I've never been more nervous about a performance in my life," she said. Carlos Mendez tuned his violin nearby. 8 billion people are counting on us to start this correctly." Amy Richardson monitored the communication systems. "We're receiving confirmations from around the world. Professional orchestras, school bands, garage musicians, street performers. Everyone is ready." Jake looked out the window and saw the silence in the sky above Earth. It was massive now, covering half the horizon like a dark storm cloud. But this wasn't a natural storm. It was an ancient entity that had consumed the creativity of countless worlds, and now it had come for humanity's music. "Dr. Chun, what are your readings?" Jake asked. Lisa looked up from her quantum measurement devices. "The silence is definitely preparing the feed. I can detect reality distortion fields forming around major population centers. It's getting ready to drain our creativity the same way it did with other species." "Then we need to start now," Jake said. He walked to the main microphone that would broadcast to the entire planet. "This is Captain Jake Martinez speaking to all of Earth. In 30 seconds, we're going to make music together like our species has never done before. Remember, this isn't about being perfect. It's about being human." He nodded to Nina, who placed her hands on the piano keys. "Here we go." Nina began with a single clear note that resonated through speakers all around the world. Then she added the simple melody they had composed, the basic tune that anyone could follow. Within seconds, the sound was joined by Carlos's violin, playing harmony that made the melody richer and more beautiful. Jake watched the screens as people around the world began to participate. A child in Africa started clapping along with the rhythm. An elderly man in Australia hummed the melody. A teenager in Brazil picked up her guitar and added her own chords. The quantum resonance is building, Lisa reported excitedly. I'm detecting reality strengthening effects in every major city. The music grew as more people joined in. Street. Musicians in Paris played their accordions. A church choir in Mexico sang the melody with their own words. Factory workers in China beat out the rhythm on metal pipes during their break, but the silence wasn't passive. As the human music grew stronger, the entity began to push back. Dark tendrils reached down from the sky toward the cities, trying to drain the music away. It's fighting us, Jake said, watching the screens. The silence is trying to consume the music as we created. Keep playing, Carlos said, his violin now singing a complex melody that weaved around Nina's piano. We knew this would happen. The battle between human music and the silence became visible in the sky. Where the music was strongest, bright lights pushed back against the darkness. But where the silence focused its attention, the lights began to dim. We're losing people, Amy Richardson reported. Some cities are going quiet. The silence is overpowering them. Jake felt panic rising in his chest. They had gotten billions of people to participate, but it might not be enough. Then something unexpected happened. On the screen showing Tokyo, Jake saw children who had stopped playing their instruments suddenly start singing instead. They were making up their own words to the melody, words about not giving up, about standing together, about fighting for their right to make music. Effects spread like wildfire. In city after city, when people could no longer play their instruments because the silence was draining them, they began to sing. And when they couldn't sing anymore, they clapped. When they couldn't clap, they stomped their feet. When they couldn't do that, they hummed quietly. Lisa, what's happening? Jake asked. The quantum patterns are changing, Lisa said in amazement. The music isn't just strengthening reality anymore. It's actually repairing the damage the silence has done over millions of years, Jake understood. The silence had been consuming creativity for so long that it had forgotten what it was like to create instead of destroy. But human music was different. It wasn't just about making beautiful sounds. It was about refusing to give up, about finding new ways to express yourself even when everything seemed hopeless. The battle in the sky intensified. The silence sent more dark tendrils toward Earth, trying to silence the music once and for all. But every time it consumed one form of human expression, another took its place. When the electronic equipment failed in some cities, people sang a cappella. When their voices grew tired, they made rhythm with whatever they could find. When they had nothing else, they made music with their heartbeats, their breathing, their very life force. It's working, Lisa shouted over the growing symphony. The silence is changing again, but this time the change is accelerating. Jake looked up at the sky and saw that the dark entity was indeed transforming. The black, empty spaces were filling with color. The consuming darkness was becoming something else, something that created instead of destroyed. Why? The silence asked, its voice now clearly audible and almost musical. Why do you not stop? I have taken your instruments, your voices, your strength. Why do you continue? Jake picked up the microphone again. Because that's what humans do. We find a way. We adapt. We never stop trying to create something beautiful, even when everything seems hopeless. But the pain, the silence said, its voice now full of confusion and something that might have been wonder. I can feel the pain in your music. The sadness, the loss, the struggle. Yes, Jake replied. Our music has pain in it, but it also has joy, hope, love, and determination. You can't have one without the others. That's what makes us human. The transformation of the silence accelerated. All across the galaxy, on worlds that had been silent for thousands of years, something stirred. The Centauri looked up from their mathematical equations and felt a strange urge to make them rhythmic. The Krell released chemical signals that smelled like melodies they had forgotten. The Vorthen began to see beauty in their logic patterns. The silence had become something new, something that inspired creativity instead of consuming it. It reached out across space and time, touching every world it had once drained, returning the music it had stolen. I remember now, the entity said, its voice now a harmony of 1,000,000 different musical traditions. I remember what I was before fear made me hunger for silence. I was the cosmic symphony, the music that connects all living things. Jake felt tears on his face as he realized what had happened. They hadn't destroyed the silence. They had healed. It transformed it back into what it was meant to be. 5 years later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the new Galactic Music Academy, watching ships arrive from across the galaxy. Today was the first Universal Music Festival, where representatives from every species would share their newly rediscovered musical traditions. A young Xanthari student walked by, humming a mathematical equation that had been turned into a beautiful melody. A Krell artist passed in the other direction, carrying a device that created music from chemical reactions. 2 Vorthan philosophers sat nearby, composing logical symphonies on their tablet computers. And everywhere, humans moved among them, not as conquerors or rulers, but as teachers and friends, helping other species explore the creativity they had forgotten they possess. The galaxy was no longer silent. It sang with the voices of 1,000,000,000,000 different beings, each adding their own unique notes to a cosmic symphony that would never end. Jake smiled and pulled out his old guitar. There was always room for one more musician in the song of the universe.